So ActionScript 3. This is the syntax language we're going to use. It shares a very similar commonality to JavaScript and Java. If you're going on to further studies, it links in really well because you will do Java if you go to university. Also, any web pages, JavaScript is used predominantly out there in the industry, and it has an English-based type syntax. Using Flash as our operating system or as our compiler to take our ActionScript 3 and compress it into a Swift file is good because it's got a debugger. So it actually tells you line 15's got an error, and also sometimes it actually tells you the exact syntax error you've got. In a lot of open source or open language like JavaScript, there is no debugger. So you have troubles finding the errors. The good thing is JavaScript, ActionScript will still run if there's an error. It sort of just flashes through the frames if there's multiple frames. In JavaScript, if there's an error, you just end up with a blank page. So there's a lot of different things that separate them apart. But in the languages that are available to us on the network at school, this is the language, the best language we can use. There are other better languages, I think, for learning, but this is the best one we have access to, so that's the one we're going to work with. All right, there's several ways you can work with the environment, but what we want to do first of all is sort of work out what we're trying to achieve. In application programming, it's all about data management. So the manipulation of data, collecting information, processing information. So that could be the results of a class or for a test. Now, in year 10, you can work, we did a grade calculator that told you if it was an A, B, C, D, or E. We worked out if it was the mark out of 20, the mark is a percentage, and we did they pass or did they fail? We wrote a little program like that. And that is fine for a year 10 assignment. Year 12, not quite. What do we do in year 12? We can do the exact assignment, but we've got to be able to do it for the whole class. And we've got to be able to show who was our top student, who was our bottom student, what was the average mark overall. So it requires us to do a loop because I asked for student 1, and then I'll ask for student 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or until the person says stop. And then from that information, if we store each one of those as individual, then we can actually then use the information we've collected to drive some statistical information out of that sort of result. That's what we're aiming for in year 12. Okay. Another key thing that we need to have is an array. So in the past, we would have actually, and I'll try to put this on screen so you can see what happens. In the past, we would actually put things like, properties, input text. We change that just to static text. We'll change that to a dark font. Okay. In the past, we used to declare variables like student 1, and then we'll have like student 2, student 3, okay? And we'll declare all these. Now to declare a variable, we might even drop into the ActionScript panel. We could actually use the code type thing. All right, so in the ActionScript panel, okay, so normally we would go like var student 1, and it might be number. So if we're keeping their test results, and we go var student 2 number. Okay, and we will go through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we keep doing those sorts of things as we go down. And then whatever the last number is, var student 20 as number. But this sort of structure is very limiting to what we can do. Because what happens if I go class of 32? If I've only declared out to 20 students, then I can't hold student number 21, 22, etc. So this data management, it doesn't suit our needs at year 12. We can't hold what's called dynamic data. I don't know how many customers you're going to have in a day. I don't know how many customers you're going to have in a year. What happens if you run it for 2 years? What happens if you run it for 5 years? What happens if you run it for 40 years? I just don't know. So storing information such as a static type dimension is very, very hard. So what we really want to do is use what's called an array structure. So this is, a standard sort of var list that we would use in the past. Now, an array structure is a little bit different. We can still have something like student, but we'd actually call it students, plural. Now, the reason for that is an array, and I suppose I should write that down. An array is a dynamic structure. So an array, I think of them like pigeonholes, okay? Think in your head a pigeonhole system. Normally you've got all these rows and columns, okay? It's a little bit like a spreadsheet. But we're looking at a row as it goes across. And if we have students, we could actually have a student there. We can, I don't want it to snap next to each other. We can have a student there. And if I just copy and paste those. So rather than in the past having student 1, 2, 3, etc., we can actually have multiple of them. And they're all known as students. But the cool thing about them is we can individually get to each one of these students. So think of them like a pigeonhole. So this is student 1, this is student 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we can actually reference those by doing the following. We can go students bracket 2. And that would actually reference the second student. Does that make sense? So they're like pigeonholes, and if you think of them out in a row. Now the cool thing about arrays are we can add to them and we can subtract students off them. We can add boxes and add more students, or we can have one. If we have only one bit of information there, really it's like a static variable. If we have 2 students, then all of a sudden it's dynamic. It's got 1, 2, but it's a cross. Now we can add more to the list. We can pop them out of the list. We can take them out of midstream. So we might want to get rid of student 3. We can actually take them out of the list and it folds up. We can sort that list alphabetically, forward or backwards. So there's a lot we can actually do to what's called an array structure. And it allows us to manage information. So if this was students, and we could actually change this now to say students' names, we could actually then do another set and put students' grades. Oh, I want all of that. Don't just want some. Okay, that looks cool. So now I have student grades. There are 2 separate arrays. So when I was talking about thinking the pigeonholes, think the top row now is called student names. The row underneath is called student grades. And in those pigeonholes, in the top one I could put Marzi, in the bottom one I could put 45%. Okay? Put Bart Simpson, and you put 2%. Lisa Simpson, 100%. And the reason for if you think of it like a pigeonhole, you know that if I talk students 2, we know that's in position 2. But if I talk something like grades bracket 2, what's that going to talk to?
The second box.
So if the top one had Lisa in it, what would have been in the second one? 100%. So you can start seeing that we can actually line that information up. And it doesn't matter if there's 1 kid in the class, there'll be 1 row, or if there's 1 column, or if there's 400 kids in the class, because there'll just be 400 columns. If I want the 400 kids information, how do I index it? How do I get to that point? Bracket. Yeah, bracket, 400 bracket. Take us out to the 400th student. Does that make sense? So what we're looking here at is an array structure. and they're dynamic, and it's different to the standard ones. A variable is a variable. They're great because you can declare, an age, and you can declare this, and that one variable holds it. But the good thing about arrays is it allows us to hold multiple data. So if I was doing a shop, I could have customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How would I know? Because I'll just index 2 and 2, which will give me customer 2 for the day. If another person comes in, then I just created customer 3. Add a box to the array. When a fourth person comes in, I add a box to the arrays. Here comes number 4, 5, 6. How do I do that? I can use a customer counter. So when I click on new customer, the customer counter goes from 1 to 2, and then all my indexes are off the customer count. So it doesn't matter if I have 2 customers or 2,000 customers. That becomes my index. So when we start talking about indexes, some people sort of find it a little bit confusing, but an index to me is like a pointer. So this one here is pointing at 3. So every time I reference 3, if I move it to 4, it's looking at these ones, 5, 6. So that's what happens.